All right, so Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim and Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Last time, we took 100 in Hadith 162 and we said عن ثوبان رضي الله عنه قال كان رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم إذا انصرف, and then we said that this was supposed to be, there was supposed to be a space right there. إذا انصرف من صلاته استغفر ثلاثا وقال اللهم أنت السلام ومنك السلام تباركت يا ذا الجلال والإكرام. Well, I mean, they were supposed to put a ya harf munada right there, but we talked about that last time. All right, so let's start with Hadith 163 عن أبي هريرة رضي الله عنه أن رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم قال الملائكة تصلي على أحدكم ما دام في مصلاه الذي صلى فيه ما لم يحدث تقول اللهم اغفر له اللهم ارحمه. Let's see the English translation. The angels pray for one of you as long as he remains in the place of prayer in which he prayed in. As long as he does not break his ablution/wudu, they say, "Oh God, forgive him. Oh God, have mercy on him." Okay, so let's look at the translation and let's compare. Al-malaikatu tusalli ala ahadikum. So when it says the angels pray for one of you, the word tusalli in general, so when you say inna Allah wa malaikatahu yusalluna ala nabi, ya ayyuha alladhina amanu sallu alayhi wa sallimu taslima. If we say Inna Allah wa malaikatahu yusalluna ala nabi. So number one, Inna Allah salatillah. How does Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala pray on the person? So salatillah ala al-abd, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would forgive that person. That's number one. For the malaika salah, they would make dua for that person, invoke Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to forgive that person and to basically shed his mercy on him. So wait a minute. Can I say Allahumma salli ala Umayyah? Can I say Allahumma salli ala Noura? Can I say Allahumma salli ala Amri? Can I say that? The answer is yes, you can. Because that's a dua for that person that you're asking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you're invoking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to forgive that person, to shed his mercy on that person. And that's permissible to do whether it's on a prophet or whether it's basically on you or I. Yet, out of respect for the prophets, this basically became as a known way for that is exclusive for prophets, but it is not necessarily exclusive to the prophets, but it can also include making dua for others. Now, when we say that it is that had become to be known as exclusive to the prophets, does that mean we can't do it on us? Yes, we can. What should we say? Well, for us, say radiyallahu anka or anki. I thought that was only for the Sahaba. No, you could also do it. Radiyallahu anki, radiyallahu an Noura, etc. And may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala forgive her, etc. These kind of du'as are actually a sunnah to make. الملائكة تصلي على أحدكم ما دام في مصلاه الذي صلى فيه ما لم يحدث. So ما دام في مصلاه, what is المصلى? So as long as the person stays within the designated spot or the designated place, it is the designated place that is al-musalla. Now, is it place or spot, meaning place to mean the premise, the place that he prayed in, or is it il-musalla to mean the actual place that he had occupied to pray in? By the way, scholars actually had differences of opinions, but just a note that most likely that it is actually speaking about the prayer place, not necessarily the designated spot. الذي صلى فيه. And that's why it didn't say الذي صلى عليه. صلى عليه or صلى فيه, that basically is the premise. ما لم يحدث. As long as the person did not lose their wudu, they are considered to be within the prayer at that time, and therefore the malaika, while the person is on their wudu and they are still within the premise of the masjid, they would basically have the malaika right there, just staying next to that person, just to do the dua for this person. اللهم اغفر له, اللهم ارحم, اللهم اغفر له, اللهم ارحم. As long as that person is there. تقول اللهم اغفر له, اللهم ارحم. The malaika would say, Ya Allah, forgive him. Ya Allah, shed your mercy on him. Give me a second, please.
Are we recording, guys?
All right, so now we're going to continue,
Are we
inshallah.
recording? I'm just making sure.
We're on YouTube.
Okay, just making sure. Jazakallah khair.
Good job. عن عبد الله بن غفر رضي الله عنه قال النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم بين كل أذانين صلاة، بين كل أذانين صلاة، ثم قال في الثالثة لمن شاء. Let's see the English translation, whether they did a good job. The Prophet ﷺ said, between every two calls to prayer, there's a prayer. Between every two calls to prayer, there's a prayer. Then he said the third time, for whoever wishes. The translation, okay, is not really accurate. It contains a lot of ambiguity. Let me explain why. When it said بين كل أذانين, what is الأذانين? الأذانين here is not talking about like أذان الظهر and أذان المغرب, or أذان الظهر and أذان العصر. No, this is talking about between the adhan and the iqamah. Between the adhan and the iqamah. Wait a minute, but the iqamah isn't an adhan. So in Lugha Arabiya, there is something that becomes like an idiom, or sometimes it is an abbreviation. So they'll say abawan, for example, talking about the mother and the father. Or, for example, al-qamaran, speaking about the sun and the moon, even though, hey, the moon is different than the sun. It has a completely different service, but they're called al-qamaran. And this is, in a way, للتغليب. What is it, تغليب? التغليب is usually when, for example, we'll take one name and then it becomes something that combines the two. So adhanain here, this is talking about al-adhan and al-iqama. So what does that mean? Let's say there's the adhan of Salat al-Dhuhr. Okay, then after approximately 15-20 minutes, that's when they will do Salat al-Jama'ah. Before they do Salat al-Jama'ah, to inform you about the start of Salat al-Jama'ah, they'll basically say Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar, or Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar, قد قامت الصلاة, قد قامت الصلاة. All right, there are differences of opinions whether it's two Allah takbirat or whether it's four. So just wanted to mention. Okay, قد قامت الصلاة, قد قامت الصلاة, and etc. Okay, now that's in that between adhan and iqama. The Prophet ﷺ said that there is a salah, there's a prayer to pray, and he emphasized that. And then in the third, he said liman sha, whoever wills. Whoever wills what? Whoever wills to pray that prayer between al-adhan and al-iqama. Wait a minute. So why did he say liman sha? He said liman sha because if he says بين كل أذانين صلاة, بين كل أذانين صلاة, such a repetition might be understood as basically an imperative statement telling us that we have to do it. So the Prophet
Oh,
ﷺ,
like fard. Yeah.
like a fard. So the Prophet
Oh,
basically made this as a parenthetical clause and said liman sha, to let us know that this is not obligatory but a recommendation. Okay, so just a note. عن أم حبيبة أم المؤمنين رضي الله عنها قالت سمعت رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم يقول ما من عبد مسلم يصلي كل يوم 12 ركعة تطوعا غير فريضة إلا بنى الله له بيتا في الجنة. Let's say in English, and what it said. There's no Muslim servant who prays 12 rak'ahs to God every day as a voluntary prayer other than the obligatory prayer, except that God will build for him a house in paradise. Okay. Let's see. So every Muslim that's praying 12 rak'ahs, and those are not the obligatory prayers. Okay. So what are we looking at here? Is this talking about Salat al-Duha? Or is this talking about what is called Sunan al-Rawatib? So what are Sunan al-Rawatib? Sunan al-Rawatib are basically the prayers that you would pray before or after the 5 daily prayers. So Sunan al-Rawatib would be 2 before Fajr. Let's do it right there, 2 before Fajr. Okay, before Fajr. And I'm going to do it this way. Okay. Okay. Or is it 2 before Dhuhr or 2 after Dhuhr, or is it 4 before Dhuhr, or is it 4 after Dhuhr? Is it 4, 4, 2 before, 2 after, 4 before, 4 after, 2 before, 4 after, 4 before, 2 after? Is it which combination is it? There are different hadith in regards to Salat al-Dhuhr, and what is, let's call it the more preponderant, the one with the strongest evidence. Just to note, all those combinations are right. And is it 4 before Asr? So that's a differences of opinions between scholars, but let's go ahead with Maghrib. It's basically 2 after Maghrib, and you got 4 Isha, it would basically be 2 after Isha. Okay, so here we go. Now, that's what majority of the scholars had mentioned, that these 12 rak'ahs are basically referring to those what are called Sunan al-Rawatib. Wait a minute, so what does Ratiba or Rawatib or Ratiba, Sunnah Ratiba, what does that word actually mean? So when you say Ratiba, that means routine. Means routine. So when we say Sunan al-Rawatib, we're speaking about the non-obligatory prayers / voluntary prayers that are the routine prayers. Okay, let's see the other hadith. عن عائشة رضي الله عنها قالت كان النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم لا يدع 4 قبل الظهر وركعتين قبل الغداة. Here's one authentic hadith that the Prophet ﷺ did not neglect the 4 rak'ahs before noon and the 2 rak'ahs before dawn. That's the Prophet ﷺ's routine and practice, that he would always pray 4 rak'ahs before Dhuhr and 2 after, or 2, sorry, 4 rak'ahs before Dhuhr and 2 before Fajr. So when you look at al-Ghadat, that means Fajr. عن عائشة رضي الله عنها النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم said ركعتا الفجر خير من الدنيا وما فيها. And he had said 2 rak'ahs of Fajr, no, not of Fajr. ركعتا الفجر خير من الدنيا وما فيها. This isn't talking about the Fajr prayer, but this is talking about the Sunan al-Rawatib, the 2 rak'ahs that come before that come before Salat al-Fajr are better than the world and everything in it. Let's move on. I think that one's pretty clear. Now we can hopefully maybe finish everything. عن أبي هريرة رضي الله عنه قال أوصاني خليلي صلى الله عليه وسلم بثلاث: صيام 3 أيام من كل شهر وركعتي الضحى وأن أوتر قبل أن أنام. The Prophet صلى الله عليه وسلم, or Abu Huraira, said in regards to the Prophet ﷺ, he said, my friend, may God bless him and grant him peace, advised me to do 3 things: fasting 3 days of every month, performing the 2 rak'ahs of duha prayer, and performing the witr before sleeping. Okay, so let's take one at a time. صيام 3 أيام من كل شهر. Which 3 days? Those are basically regarding صيام أيام البيض. What are أيام البيض and where are they called أيام البيض? أيام البيض are basically the days when it's a full moon, which in the Hijri calendar, that would fall between 13, 14, and the 15th day of the Hijri month. All right, so just keep that one in mind. It would be 13, 14, 15. It depends on whether it's a fast moon, 29 days, or whether it's a slower moon, 30 days. So here we go. To fast 3 days every single month, those would be أيام البيض, ركعتي الضحى. What is ركعتي الضحى? 2 rak'ahs for the duha prayer. Okay, duha, when does that happen? So duha would basically start let's start right after Fajr, probably by sunrise, maybe 20, half an hour, like half an hour time. And that's when you could pray Salatul Duha. Okay. And there is another hadith where the Prophet ﷺ talked about it, حين ترمض الفصال, but that's another hadith, so we'll talk about that one later. وأن أوتر قبل أن أنام, and to pray witr before going to sleep. So how many rak'ahs? 3 to 11 or 3 to 13 rak'ahs. If we are to include a shafa with witr, then in that situation, witr prayer would basically be 13, or the witr in general is only 11. Yet, a couple things about witr to say. The Prophet ﷺ had forbid that we would pray witr like we're praying maghrib. So let's say you wanted to pray 3 rak'ahs. You don't do the tashahhud in the second rak'ah. You only do the tashahhud in the third. Yet if you were praying 5, you were praying 7, you were praying 9, or 11, you would basically do the tashahhud before the last and also in the last one. Okay, وأن أوتر قبل أن أنام. This one's quite interesting. You know how he said أوصاني خليلي. Now the word Khalil, the person that is Khalil is basically, yes, it can be a person that originally comes from Khalil, like myself, and it could also mean my friend, my comrade, my supporter, etc. That's Khalil. Okay, عن ابن عمر رضي الله عنهما قال قال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم صلاة الليل مثنى مثنى فإذا خشي أحدكم الصبح صلى ركعة واحدة توتر له ما قد صلى. What is صلاة الليل? صلاة الليل is basically night prayer, is 2 by 2. And if one of you fears the dawn, he should pray 1 rak'ah to make up for what he had prayed. Okay, so let's see. So the night prayer is 2 by 2. What about Isha? Isha has exclusive evidence, but this is talking about Qiyam al-Layl, that you would do it in a set of 2. فإذا خشي أحدكم الصبح, if you feel that you're going to lose Fajr, let's say for those that would basically pray and read a lot of Quran. So in that situation, if you fear that, hey, looks like I'm not going to make it for Fajr, for the following Fajr, I'll just pray right here and not in a jama'ah. That way I can just consider um, basically not in a jama'ah, and kind of lost it for a second. Okay. Okay, sorry about that, everybody. So the night prayer is 2 by 2, and if one of you fears the dawn, if you fear that if you were prolonging your, let's call it those 2 rak'ahs, 2 by 2, and the person's probably reading along surah. So in that situation, if one fears the dawn, fears that is what dawn, fears Fajr prayer, then just pray 1 rak'ah to make up for what that person had been always doing. So they had been assuming that this person had always been a person that was doing Qiyam al-Layl. But there was one particular day where that person was feeling tired. So in that situation, the person would pray 1 rak'ah, that is 1 rak'ah of witr. And then, even if he didn't pray all the witr, it will basically give him the reward of as if he had prayed more than that. عن ابن عمر رضي الله عنهما أن رسول
I,
الله صلى الله عليه وسلم.
I have
Go
a
ahead,
question.
Bruce.
Sorry.
Go
I
ahead.
just wanted to ask, is it better to make the rak'ah longer, or is it better to have more rak'ah?
It's the best thing is to make it longer.
Okay, so not as many, but longer.
Right.
And if you, I mean, we can read because right?
Right. You
From the
you can read from the Mus'haf.
Okay.
Or your phone, you're reading the Mus'haf that's on your app, that's okay too. And even for those that wanted to differentiate between a person that is doing faridah and between a person that is doing a non-faridah prayer and reading directly from the Quran, they don't really have an evidence. And one of the scholars that supported this was Ibn Uthaymeen himself from the modern scholars. And he basically said that it doesn't make a difference. Well, I mean, not that it doesn't make a difference, but that it's permissible to hold the Quran even if the person is reading a farida prayer. All right. عن ابن عمر رضي الله عنهما أن رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم قال اجعلوا آخر صلاتكم بالليل وترا. Make the last prayer that you would do throughout the night is basically the witr prayer. عن أبي هريرة رضي الله عنه عن النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم إذا أقيمت الصلاة فلا صلاة إلا المكتوبة. What is إذا أقيمت الصلاة? Let's see. When the prayer is called, there's no prayer except the obligatory one. So what does that mean? When the prayer is called for jama'ah, okay? If the prayer was called for jama'ah, then that person is not allowed to go pray except what is obligatory. So what does that mean? So let's say they're lining up for Salat al-Jama'ah. If they're lining up for Salat al-Jama'ah, yeah, can I just, I guess, I'll just pray and then make my Salah like really quick on a side because I had missed my Dhuhr, and I'll just make it really quick. And of course, it's going to take his time for the first rak'ah, so I'll make it Dhuhr really quick and then follow along. The answer is no. Join along the congregational prayer, and then what about Asr? It's makruh to pray after Asr. Not if it's a makeup. Not if it's basically because you never know. You could never live that long. So إذا أقيمت الصلاة بمعنى أقيمت في المسجد أقيمت الإقامة فلا صلاة إلا المكتوب. Then no one would have the permission to pray with the congregation or outside of the congregation except what is obligatory. عن أبي هريرة أن رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم من أدرك ركعة من الصلاة فقد أدرك الصلاة. من أدرك ركعة قبل من أدرك ركعة من الصلاة فقد أدرك الصلاة. Whoever makes it for the prayer, even if it's by 1 rak'ah. So what does that mean? Let's say you only prayed the last rak'ah in congregation and not the whole thing. Even if you made it just for by one rak'ah, that means you had basically reached that time within the masjid and would be considered by the malaika that you had scurried to go to the masjid. All right. عن أبي هريرة رضي الله عنه قال سمعت رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم يقول, let's see. Should we finish our sunnah if the call to prayer is even called? Should we finish our sunnah? If you were already praying, just finish what you're doing and then you can join along. عن أنس بن مالك رضي الله عنه عن النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم قال سووا صفوفكم فإن تسوية الصفوف من إقامة الصلاة. The Prophet ﷺ said سووا صفوفكم. What is سووا صفوفكم? سووا صفوفكم means straighten your rows. For straightening the rows is part of establishing prayer. عن أبي هريرة رضي الله عنه أن النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم قال خرجت يوم خير يوم طلعت عليه الشمس يوم الجمعة فيه خلق آدم وفيه أدخل الجنة أو فيه أدخل الجنة وفيه أخرج منها ولا تقوم الساعة. Sorry, I'm losing my focus. Hold on. Do it again. خير يوم طلعت عليه الشمس يوم الجمعة فيه خلق آدم وفيه أدخل الجنة وفيه أخرج منها ولا تقوم الساعة إلا في يوم الجمعة. Okay, so خير يوم طلعت عليه الشمس meaning the best day that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had basically, the best day that the sun had risen on that day was basically on a Friday. فيه خلق آدم, and that was the day that Adam alayhi salam was created. وفيه أدخل الجنة, and that was the day that he was introduced to Jannah, or at least made to dwell in Jannah. And وَفِيهِ أُخْرِجَ مِنْهَا, and that's when that day was the day that he got out of that Jannah. وَلَا تَقُومُ السَّاعَةُ إِلَّا فِي يَوْمِ الْجُمُعَةِ, and Judgment Day will not happen except on a Friday. Okay, let's see. عن أبي هريرة رضي الله عنه أن رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم قال إذا قلت لصاحبك أنصت يوم الجمعة والإمام يخطب فقد لغوت. If you were to tell your friend to stay quiet or unsit during the Friday prayer and the Friday ceremony in particular, that's when it would consider as a laghu. What is a laghu? A laghu basically means you engaged in not idle talk, but you had actually engaged in vain talk, in trivial speech. That's what a laghu is. Okay.
Like worthless talk with no point, right?
Well, there you go, with no point. عن أبي هريرة رضي الله عنه قال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم من صام رمضان إيمانا واحتسابا غفر له ما تقدم من ذنبه. Whoever prays Ramadan إيمانا واحتسابا. What does that mean? What does it mean to pray Ramadan with Iman? It means that the person is basically believing in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, believing in the obligation, basically being committed and consistent in their siyam, wahtisaban, meaning that they basically want the reward from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and not from anyone else, or probably getting any praise. Okay, if the person fasted Ramadan with complete sincerity, complete faith, and also, of course, if we're talking about complete sincerity, complete faith, we're also talking about the person being committed. غفر له ما تقدم من ذنبه. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would wipe the sins away from this person that had committed such a sin. Okay. I need to end right here. Sorry, I'm losing my focus. So inshallah, I know I stopped early, but inshallah we'll continue tomorrow, inshallah.
Inshallah.